firstly, about, I think it was on the front of the Daily Telegraph this morning, civil servants working from home. Are you outraged, Nadine, or is this...
Am I outraged that they are working from home?
Can you do all the work you need to do to run a government department if you're working from home?
I'd say, I know I'm out on a limb on this because a lot of people probably don't agree with me, but I think for me, it's not where someone sits to do the job. It's not which desk they're behind or which chair they're sat on. It's the work that they produce. Now, I think there's a balance because obviously collegiate working, team building, all that kind of brainstorming stuff that happens within a department. You do need civil servants in some of the week, but I'm not one of these people who says, no, everyone has to be in. And I was completely open. When I was Secretary of State, I was totally open to people working from home as long as they produce the work.
Blimey, I agree with you.
Oh, my goodness. This is not good. It must have been the galaxy.
Yeah, I'm off now.
Well, let me put this to you. So this is an audit of Whitehall office attendance. And critics say the statistics show Labour has gone soft already. Alex Burkhardt, who's the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, said this Labour government has made a big song and dance about getting people back to work, but they should check their own departments are in order first. If Labour want to improve productivity, this would be a good place to start. And Richard Tice says we have the worst nightmare in Whitehall. He's a Reform MP, of course. Public sector spending rising, attendance falling, productivity collapsing.
Those figures, I've heard the government response and saying the figures actually July, August, September, I think even possibly into October, the proportion in work was higher than last year at the same time. They say that's the other side of it. But I agree with Nadine on this. Look, if you're working, that is the key bit. And the fact is, those who might skive, if they're at home, are the type who would skive in the office anyway.
And they'll get caught out. It's not just Whitehall, it's across business. Yeah. Businesses are realising that the cost of infrastructure, the cost of assets and building, they can actually be more profitable if they manage people who are working from home in a good and positive way.
You've got to appreciate a lot of people can't work from home.
Yeah.
If you're a driver, construction, you're a nurse, a doctor.
Often younger people who are living in flats where they don't actually have that much space.
That's right. It's an attempt to create division, isn't it, between those who are lucky that they can at times and those who can't at all.
And it's women, it's a good thing for women as well. So my daughter works from home 3 days a week, and I watch her logging on at 9 o'clock at night, sometimes till 11 p.m. at night, because she will pick up her daughter from school if she needs to, but she will put all those hours back in the evening, because conscientious people do.
That was what I was going to make. In my experience, working from home is totally exhausting.
Yeah.
Because you are on your own, you aren't being distracted by people going for a coffee or coming for a chat. The idea that it's less productive to work from home, of course it's the case if you want to skive, then that's less productive. I would say, in general, people who work from home work in a very intensive way.
I see it. I see relentless hours being done at night and at weekends, and think, if you were in the office, you wouldn't be doing that.
Right, let's move on to these new allegations.
On the same theme of working from home?
Yeah, because he's, of course, stepped aside, Gregg Wallace, from Masterchef, and now the BBC has pulled the 2 Masterchef Christmas specials. We were talking, weren't we, Kevin, yesterday, about the fact that this time yesterday morning they were insisting they were going out. Now they are not. And I wonder if the BBC knew at this time yesterday about these fresh allegations. And they are, in fact, reported by BBC News. One woman says he touched her bottom at an event, and another says he pressed his crotch against her while filming on a different show. The BBC put the allegations to Gregg Wallace's representatives on Saturday. His lawyers, of course, strongly deny he engages in behaviour of a sexually harassing nature. But these allegations have gone up a notch and become less about inappropriate banter and now allegations of inappropriate touching or groping.
I think somewhat probably all of those who are saying, well, it's just words, you can't see anything now, would not find that acceptable in any way. And denials will come in, but these allegations have been swirling around and have been made for some time, and you've got to get them over a legal line to be able to. You've got to question the people. They can't just say, "Oh, this happened," and that's it. You've got to go when, where, how. Who did you speak to? What's the corroborating evidence? Because they're serious allegations, and it's getting worse and worse for him. And I think the dam is breaking, and there's more to come.
And it does, Nadine. You've obviously, as cabinet minister, dealt a lot with the BBC. It does feel as though this is not the first time it's happened. It's not the first time the BBC has has found itself to be behind the curve, knew about things over a long period of time. We know that there were letters being exchanged 7 years ago on the very issue of Gregg Wallace's behaviour, not simply what he said. And are they handling this wrong?
So I think they've probably reached too late. They've been too slow to get there. A good position in terms of pulling the Christmas special, but keeping the programme going. The reason why is it's not just Gregg Wallace on this programme, it's a number of people's lives who are affected, not least the contestants, who probably have made their own representations that they want it to continue. So it's a tricky one, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Organisations, broadcasting organisations, wherever, and I've said this so many times just recently, wherever you have hierarchy, you have deference, wherever you have these people who set themselves up as some kind of, gods, a bit like you, Ed, so like big in the media, and people look up to you. I'm not saying, obviously, Ed, that you would behave in any way that's inappropriate, but people will look up to you as somebody who is a big person in broadcasting, and people will be deferential to you in their behaviour, who are working for you. And I think that's one of the problems that happens within television and within the media.
Do you think that's exclusive to the media? I imagine, you've worked in Parliament.
That happens in the church. It happens in Westminster.
Exactly.
It happens in cultures, within organisations where a culture will develop. Now, here you have a very open culture in this programme. Great crew, everybody gets on very well. But you can see there are, and I'm talking about individual programmes, like Masterchef and others, where they're quite insular, and you can see that a culture would develop where people would be afraid to speak out against Gregg Wallace because he's the big man of Masterchef. People would women particularly, would feel uncomfortable, like it would affect them in terms of how they'd be regarded or marked or treated while they were on that programme. And that is the problem, hierarchy and deference. It breeds a toxic culture, whether it's media, the church, politics, political parties, Westminster, where even in companies, we've seen it in organisations as well.
Kevin, Nadine makes the point that on the kind of Masterchef, the core Masterchef programme, you've got other contestants for whom this is life-changing. Yeah. They're not celebrities. Might become celebrities after they win, but they're not celebrities. Really important for the show to go ahead. So you can kind of understand the BBC's decision. But I wonder when it comes to the Christmas specials, whether either the BBC heard these new allegations and thought, right, it can't go ahead, or, and I don't know this, but there were obviously high-profile people involved in those films who might have said at some stage, I don't want to be associated with this anymore.
I think that's almost certainly the case. Actually, you would think...
And easier to do with a Christmas special because it's a one-off.
And easier to do if you're a celebrity with a higher profile who has that equivalent
rather than a
voice.
Contestant, somebody, again, who has their own hierarchy, somebody who can actually speak up and say, I'm not going to be
But on the cynical side, of course... It could be life-changing in a different way if you're seen to be laughing and joking along with somebody.
That is exactly it.
Contractually, they won't have the power to stop it, contractually. But if they simply come out and say, I don't want to be seen with Gregg Wallace, that's the threat. It's so damaging.
That is the threat. I wish they'd pulled it. I didn't want to appear in this. I asked them not to. How can you, over Christmas, families watching...
That's soft
we're
power.
having a bit of a laugh, bit of a joke. We didn't know then.
A special with Strictly Come Dancing. No, it's not what you want.
I mean, the BBC is in a very difficult position when it's spent an enormous amount of money on a lot of people producing these programmes, and they will fear more will come out too.
Wonderful to see the Princess of Wales on state duty yesterday. She took part in her first state visit since undergoing cancer treatment. She was greeting the Emir of Qatar and his wife on horse guards parades. Now, I understood a couple of days ago that the Queen herself, the reason that the Princess of Wales was stepping up was because the Queen herself wasn't going to be able to take part. We understand now that she's been suffering with pneumonia. She missed the outdoor parts of the reception, but attended events in Buckingham Palace later in the day, including the state banquet. Wonderful pictures. you have any concerns, Nadine, Emir of Qatar coming for a state visit? Or should we always roll out the red carpet and this is a
Look, it's not
soft
just
power you were talking about?
Yeah, but it's not just the royal family, it's government too. This is, we only have, I think it's 2 state visits, major state visits in the UK a year. And if they're good for business, good for the economy, and always good for diplomatic relations, whatever, it doesn't matter which country it is. If a state visit has been sanctioned, there'll be reasons for doing so. It's always good to have those conversations and those diplomatic relationships. And actually, I heard some of the King's speech last night when he was talking about the Emir of Qatar, who was educated here. He was at Sandhurst. He was at school here. He went to Harrow. So he has links going back into the UK a lot. I know you're not going to be particularly happy with that.
No, we can call him the Emir or we can call him a dictator, actually.
Yeah, well, I'll do Emir, you dictator.
Before the World Cup, I twice went into that country to go into the labour camps where they'd brought in migrant labour from around the world to build all the facilities. They were dying in huge numbers, working and living in appalling conditions. So
but we still had the World Cup there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And footballing terms, it was very successful. But behind the scenes, it was pretty terrifying.
But we can't police behind the scenes in every country in the world.
If you're gay in that country.
Yeah, I'm gay in lots of countries.
And I understand why, because they sell a lot of gas, they buy a lot of weapons, they're a regional power. I understand why this goes on.
But what is the best way to try and help them see that there's a better way to treat their employees?
You've got to speak to them. And Keir Starmer's about to go to Saudi Arabia, where I no doubt he'll bow and scrape towards Mohammed bin Salman, the leader who ordered the butchering of a journalist.
But we needed them. When Putin invaded Ukraine, that's where our oil was coming from.
I understand why it goes on, but when I watch those scenes, I'm sorry, I can't just say, oh, isn't this lovely? I'm glad Camilla's on the mend. I'm really pleased Kate is on the mend. When you were watching a young mother with children who had cancer, on a human level, you think, But I do feel it's all a little demeaning, and human rights are sidelined in terms for cash and military power.
What do you want us to do? Become this little insular country?
I would like to be. There's a fly around here. I would like.
No flies on you.
I'm ready.
It must be lynx. Anyway, it's so I always feel when you know what those countries are like and what the leaders are like, I feel uncomfortable about it.
Yeah. So it's Prime Minister's questions today. Kemi Badenoch's 4th outing. New leader of the opposition. I have to say that I thought she did really well in the first week, but we've not heard much from Kemi Badenoch in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The government's been under huge pressure from the newspapers, but I'm not sure the opposition have been kind of as present and front and centre as you might have expected. What do you think, Nadine? How's she doing so far?
Well, she's got to get to work. She's got to start getting out there and doing her job. I mean, you've had more from Robert Jenrick, I think, over the past few weeks, who was her main contestant in the final 2. So I've heard this a lot over the past couple of weeks. Where's Kemi? So Kemi
You've heard that from Conservative members, Conservative MPs?
So I think the issue with Kemi is she's made a number of speeches and she's, good at doing the set speeches, which are written. But what we need to see is Kemi on her feet, taking on Starmer and taking on the big issues. So, let's think of one that's just recently
farmers, for instance, the inheritance tax.
I mean, she was out there at the demonstration, photographed at the front of the demonstration. But we actually need to see her in debate and taking the Conservative Party forward and taking the fight to Labour. That is the job of the opposition. The job of the Labour Party was to take the fight to the Conservative government. I think we need to see more of that.
Is she under threat from reform? I mean, when it comes to the next election, are people who are minded like you to say, we don't have an effective, strong leader, but reform do, and they're more vocal on the issues and they're more... I mean, Richard Tice has inserted himself on the front of the Daily Telegraph this morning, talking about working from home. Is the Conservative Party going to leak votes to reform?
So I put it a different way. I think, there's 4.5 years to the next election. What I would say is that Reform are getting themselves very organised across the country on a regional basis. They're getting funding together. They're becoming mainstream news in newspapers. You're now seeing them on the front of national newspapers, as you've just pointed out. I think there is a problem in the Conservative Party, and I think it's that Labour have done so badly since they won the election. They've become so unpopular. Their poll rating and Keir Starmer's personal poll rating is so low that it's made Conservatives complacent. They think that it's Labour's to lose and they're just going to walk into the next election.
Don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. Perhaps
people are going to say,
policy.
let's give the votes back to the Conservatives, but that's not going to happen because I think Reform are getting themselves very organised and I think they're going to grow in popularity much more over the next 4 years.
Your friend Andrea Jenkins, the former Conservative MP, has jumped ship to Reform.
Kevin, actually, before you make this point, and then last week she changed her mind and has now actually defected and joined Reform. Do you think there are other Conservatives out there who are thinking, no, I'm a Conservative, but they're tempted, or as you say, are they thinking, actually, I don't need to defect because Labour's going to lose and therefore we're going to get back in?
No, I think the problem is within the party in Westminster at the moment. I think there are a number of former Conservative MPs in constituencies where they see Reform have done well.
Like Andrea, who lost in Morley.
Who I think she's standing for Mayor of Lincolnshire, isn't she? I think you'll find that there are those MPs who'll be weighing it up and thinking to themselves, right, I've got a public profile, I've been the MP once before, if I stand here I could win this for Reform, who definitely will make that leap.
Might you be tempted?
Me, no.
No, you're sticking with the Conservative Party.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Even under a leader that who you think is ineffective.
Stop questioning me.
You're literally on this programme to be questioned.
No, I'm not. I'm here to do the paper review.
Well, it sounds a little bit like... I mean, if Andrea, back in March, said exactly what you said, I'm absolutely staying.
So there's no point questioning me then, is there?
No, it's because you've been there, you've done that, you were a minister, a cabinet minister.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's you know, I have history with the Conservative Party, which is, I suppose I'm tribal. In the same way, you know, Ed or anybody else who's been a cabinet minister is tribal to the party and loyal to the party that they served in. And that's just where it is for me.
But, of course, Andrea Jenkins became...
By the way, I just point out, I think Ed is less tribal and more neutral. Now, I think you're sort of... You're able to...
I'll behave.
No, totally. I think you're able to put any loyalty aside, if you have any.
Well, oh, no, he does.
My job is to ask hard questions of politicians. I will do that today with Heidi Alexander as I would with any other...
without fear
to say the words, fuel allowance.
That's exactly.
That said, here, you know, and I could do that when I was doing TV of my own. That's when you're in front of a camera. And what your personal loyalty and allegiance is something completely different. And your my personal allegiance is to the Conservative Party.
That's really interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that loyalty should be blind. I would have thought that loyalty should shift if a party ceases to represent what you believe.
So, you know, this is where I've realised recently, I could never in the past understand how and why Labour MPs supported Jeremy Corbyn. I just couldn't understand how they could stand for election under a man like Corbyn. And I think I've realised recently, since we've lost, why it was, because your first allegiance, I think, is to your party, and I think the second is to the individual leaders. And I did, for the first time, understand why some MPs that I'd respected and thought, wow, how can you stand there and promote this man? I think I understand now a little bit of how that was possible.
It was also the case, though, at the time, that those who defected, went to a new party, Chukra Moona, Chris Leslie, I mean, that all collapsed. And the ones who stayed in the fight. The interesting question for me, though, which is the question you can answer, is about Boris Johnson. Because, of course, Andrea Jenkins was, in the end, a big champion of Boris. Andrea, having thought about it, has defected. Is there any chance that Boris could be lured over to the Reform position?
Absolutely no way. No way. No.
Why do you say it so adamantly?
Oh, it just won't happen. But, you know, do also bear in mind Andrea's personal circumstances. She's a single mother with a little boy. Her career, this is what happens to a lot of MPs. They give a lot of their life to politics. They become MPs, they lose their seats, and they're faced with the scenario of what next? And I think I can understand from personal reasons also why Andrew has decided to move to Reform and to stand for...
I understand that, but just on the Boris point, so, you know, I'm not doubting that...
So that deflection didn't work then?
No, I'm not doubting whether that what you say is right, but if it is the case, there's speculation that Elon Musk, the American Trump supporter, owner of Twitter and Tesla, is thinking about, can he give a large amount of money to the Reform Party? Reform now comes second in huge numbers of seats, the most successful third party in the last election that we've seen for a very, very long time, if not ever. Question mark, could Reform be the guys who come through the middle, defeat Labour and Labour seats, take over from the Tories? In that circumstance, if you're Boris Johnson and you're thinking, well, I'm frustrated, I was thrown out by the Conservative Party, but I want to kind of make it right, are you sure there's not a part of him which thinks to himself, you know, this could be my way back to, you know, potential government?
No.
No.
No, just, it won't happen. It'll never happen. And what I will say is this, is
Why,
there is only one person...
Why? Because he's tribal?
There's only one person who can out Farage, and that is Boris Johnson. So if Boris Johnson came back to the Conservative Party, the reason why Farage is so
he
big...
should come back and take on Farage from the Conservative Party.
So the reason why Farage is so big on the political stage at the moment, and the reason why he's doing so well, and the reason why Elon Musk is pledging to give him £800 million or whatever it is because Boris Johnson has exited the political stage. That's the reason why he's so big on it.
Sure.
He's filled a vacuum that was there. Now, if Boris Johnson wants to come back into politics, he'd come back into the Conservative Party, I believe, but, you know...
Well, Nigel Farage is never going to be Prime Minister. I mean, you know...
Oh, can we make sure we keep those words?
Look, it's totally not impossible that Reform wins an election. Every time Nigel Farage has been faced with the idea of kind of governing, of actually acting, I just think he's not that kind of person. He's an agitator. He's an outsider. The alliance of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson together, now that would be powerful. You could imagine Nigel Farage saying, Boris, you know, you're the man.
That's why we have Brexit, because it was the two of them.
Exactly.
I think it's been not a disaster, but you could see, coming from slightly different traditions on the right, different directions, they pulled it off.
You can imagine Nigel Farage seeing it, and Elon Musk thinking, exactly as you said, Boris is our guy to be the figurehead of something which actually breaks open the mould of British politics. Is that impossible?
No, it's not impossible, but, you know, I never say never, but there's no world at the moment in which I could see that happening.